Welcome back, loves, to another soul-expanding episode of Awaken Your Authentic Self. Today, we are diving deep into what it truly means to awaken and embody your authentic essence, not just in the quiet moments of meditation, but in the living, breathing pulse of everyday life. My guest today is someone who not only understands this, but lives it fully. Kara Goodwin is a spiritual guide, energy healer, and the host of Soul Elevation podcast, which is ranked in the top 2% of podcasts worldwide. She's also the author of Your Authentic Awakening, a guide to everyday spiritual living, a beautifully grounded and multi-dimensional roadmap for returning home to your true self. After more than 15 years in the corporate world, Kara's life took a profound turn following a series of personal challenges that led her to meditation, and through that into expanded states of consciousness, higher realms, and a deeper sense of divine connection. Today, she helps others do the same through her book, her workshops, her healing transmissions, and her podcast that reaches hearts all around the world. Kara, thank you. It is such an honor to have you here. Welcome to Your Authentic Self. I'm losing my own podcast name. And thank you for sharing your light with us here today.
Oh, Jessica, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have our conversation today. I love the serendipity and synchronicity with my book title and your podcast title that caught my attention right away. So I think we're in for a lot of fun today.
Love it. Well, Kara, you've shared that your awakening journey began after a series of personal challenges, experiences that ultimately opened the door to higher realms and a deeper spiritual awareness. Can you share with us what that turning point felt like on a soul level? What shifted within you when you realized your old way of living no longer aligned with your truth?
Yeah, it is looking back, it was a series of things, really. So it kind of happened bit by bit. And I look back at who I was. You mentioned I was in the corporate world for over 15 years. So I look back at that version of myself, and it seems as though I'm radically different now. But all of that happened sort of step by step. And I feel like the actual spiritual awakening, there were points of like concentrated change where it really felt like things were changing rapidly. And also things have kind of happened bit by bit. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense.
But you alluded to, that I had a series of challenges that happened really quickly. And that was the start. That was kind of the tipping point of me getting out of the sort of mainstream everyday living and entering into a spiritual awakening. And what that looked like for me is that I was living in Italy at the time, and I know you're in Spain right now, so we also have that connection.
Yes.
But I was there for my husband's job, and I had two little kids, and we went through this period of very concentrated amount of time where we had all of these what you could safely call tragedies happen. So it started with the suicide of my sister-in-law, and she was not only my sister-in-law, but a very close friend of mine.
Oh, I'm
And that was
sorry.
heartbreaking. And about 3 weeks after that, our dog passed away. And a few weeks after that, my stepdad underwent surgery on his brainstem. And shortly after that, my mother-in-law was hit by a motorbike while she crossed the street.
Oh my gosh.
And then this all happened within 7 months. So the final piece to that was my stepmom became critically ill, went to the top of the heart transplant list, and had a heart transplant. And all of that happened while we were living abroad. So that added another element of heartache because we couldn't really hold anybody's hand while we were all processing what was happening. And so I through that, I explored meditation eventually because I just felt like I was adrift and I felt like I didn't know what was going to happen next. And I'd been interested in meditation for a long time, but I'd never been able to really develop a practice. I never felt that I knew what I was doing.
I know
And
that
I was
feeling.
intrigued by it, but I felt that I had these blocks. And so I really felt that I wanted, that it was the right time for me to learn. And so I found a teacher and I started exploring meditation. But even though, like, my teachers were monks, actually, so they were
Wow.
spiritual.
Nice.
And they, were advising prayer before meditation, and they were advising that we use meditation to deepen our connection to God. But when I first came into meditation, I really was just interested in calming my nervous system and feeling more secure and having it as a coping mechanism. And I really wasn't sure about the whole spiritual thing. There was one part of me that was always intrigued by spiritual things and, wanted to hear the ghost stories and wanted
The
to,
paranormal, yes.
yes. And, how is it that people get information other ways besides their five senses? That those types of things intrigued me, but I didn't feel that they were accessible to me because I didn't feel that I was born that way,
Right.
I didn't feel that I had psychic gifts and I didn't really have a lot of experience with the paranormal that I remembered. And so I was really just using it as a coping mechanism, as I mentioned. And because I was learning from monks, they were actually from like a yogic tradition. And any kind of spiritual foundation that I have in this life had been religious. I had experience with going to an Episcopal church growing up. We weren't diehard, we were familiar with it, and we kind of had a church that we went to, but we weren't like really deeply embedded in the community. But that was my foundation. So when the way that these monks were practicing spirituality was unfamiliar to me, and that added another layer of like, I'm not sure about that, but I know I do feel better when I meditate. So
Right.
I'll take pieces of this and not, other parts. And so it is interesting to look back and recognize the opening, how that kind of spiral, how that flower started to blossom
Right.
of becoming more connected to myself spiritually, opening my connection to God and to, spirituality in general. And because now, like you mentioned in the introduction, I'm very passionate about that connection to spirit. I think that connection to who we are in the eternal sense, beyond the physical, beyond the five senses, beyond this physical realm, that's the eternal aspect of who we are, and that's the truth of who we are. And we get all of this piled onto us of expectations and conditioning and what it is to be a human and to be in society. And that's all this debris that comes on top of us where we're trained,
Societal norms.
how to. Yeah, so it's really like I just love connecting with people on that level, and I love helping them to connect to their own, I call it, the higher self, but their own spiritual guidance that's within them, because I think that makes for such a more fulfilling life. And when we develop that connection, we strengthen that connection, it's really the foundation for living a purposeful life.
I love
So
that. Absolutely.
that's kind of the ins and outs of my origin story, if we want to call it that.
Well, you went from being a corporate success, right, to being soul aligned. So many listeners of this show are navigating that same pull, the desire to leave behind what looks successful on paper, but feels empty inside. How did you bridge that gap between the identity you had built in the corporate world and the authentic self you were being called to embody?
That's such a thoughtful question. And it's, I'll begin the same way I began the last answer, because it's really a step by step thing that we navigate as we move through our life. And we have versions of this that come up throughout our life. So, I feel very fortunate that I am, that professionally I'm living a life that is so fulfilling to my heart. And when we're going through a spiritual awakening, I feel like it's very natural for us to think in terms of, okay, well, now that I understand the world in a spiritual way, I want to have my profession or my career reflect that. And it's such a beautiful service when we're able to make that happen. But truthfully, it can take time, and we need to have a little bit of experience before we really are able to make our profession match where we're kind of just starting to immerse ourselves, if that makes sense. It's kind of like if you get really into dolphins, just I'm just thinking back to being a kid and when I went to SeaWorld and it was like, oh my God, I want to be a marine biologist. I think everybody went through their marine biology phase.
I think you're right. And it was probably because of the dolphins.
Right. Or Shamu or, whatever, like the killer whales, the orcas. But, we get immersed in something that we become passionate about, and it speaks to our soul. And there's just something so special. And it's like, I want to experience this all the time. And I want my career to be aligned with it. And it's such a beautiful offering when we are able to do that. And it doesn't always happen right away. And that's actually not the path for everyone. So I know that there are a lot of people who are like, well, I've done this corporate job for a long time, and now, I don't want to work for a big company. I feel really disoriented. I don't feel aligned with the work that I'm doing and what my soul is learning, where my soul is headed. And there is so much validity to that. So when we find ourselves in that situation, we want to stay open and alert for opportunities that start to come in that present themselves in a way that we can start reorienting our life. That may be one of the ways that starts to show up. But I really like to emphasize to people that we need awakened souls everywhere.
Yes.
And so it might be by design. Like if we feel like we keep hitting a wall and we keep going back to, our only option right now seems to be this same 3D job that I've been in for so long that doesn't feel like it's nurturing my soul. And so it's this dance of watching for the signs, of praying for what it is that we want, of asking our higher self and our divine team to help us to get as aligned as we can, while also recognizing that we very well may be offering a service in the situation we're already in. Because it may be that we are in, let's say, I'm just going to pick maybe we're a marketing professional for global financial company. And we're like, this doesn't feed my soul. But you're around people who are not yet where you are from a consciousness perspective. And really that's what we are. We are these human beings with human bodies, but we are consciousness.
Yes.
And consciousness goes way beyond our body. It goes way beyond the words we say. It goes beyond everything. And the more we become aligned energetically, and our consciousness has more and more expansion, and it has more and more room where we're honoring the consciousness that we are, and we're moving through the world from that perspective, we are subconsciously affecting everything. And there is so much quantum research. One organization that's worth mentioning is the HeartMath Institute, and what they've done in terms of research and what's happening, how we're all communicating to each other, and we're receiving information from each other through our hearts and through consciousness that defies the linear, logical, rational mind. So even if we think like, oh, I got to go in the office today and I don't have anybody to talk to about these things that I'm now interested in, and I don't really care about these financial products that I'm supposed to get people to buy, and I totally sympathize with that. But it may be that you have this period of time where there's this in-between phase where you're doing something that maybe feels like it's an expression of the old version of you, but it's actually very purposeful from a soul perspective, and it's actually a huge service that even if you're not out there like evangelizing, where you're not necessarily even sharing your views with people, but you are changing, and
Right.
that is changing other people way behind the scenes and under the surface. So I think it's important, like I said, it's a dance, because it's not like we allow ourselves to stay stuck when we feel stuck, and to stay malnourished from an energy perspective when we're not getting what we need from the environment that we find ourselves in. I want everybody to feel empowered to create their lives in the most aligned way, while also recognizing that our lives are masterpieces. And so
Absolutely.
sometimes when we have the ability to look back and we're like, oh my God, I felt so stuck, but now I see that there
Why?
was this beautiful design to everything.
I get that completely. Before I just moved here, I'll share that I left my corporate job of 16 years.
Yeah.
And my awakening after that happened like 5 years ago, 2020. I just started feeling the differences. And I started to, the last couple of years were kind of difficult, noticing how I wasn't aligned anymore with the work I was doing. But it really was this past year where I just felt like I was being pushed out and being energetically pushed out. And it was a deep kind of misery and sadness where I wanted to go in and I wanted to be with my employees who I loved being with. So it was that dance that you speak of, but I really didn't care about the metrics anymore. I didn't care about, I just wanted to help the employees and be there for them. And the funny thing is that after I left, I gave them a month's notice. They let me go in 3 days because they thought I had like those big inner secrets that I was holding on to, and I didn't share where I was going with them. But my employees actually put together this last minute huge luncheon for me and went round table telling me the difference that I made in each of their lives. I mean, I was in tears for I can't tell
Wow,
you
I
for how long.
bet.
But they were so supportive of my journey now, and they were like, we know that this was just not meant for you anymore. This is not who you are. And
That's
so it
beautiful.
just made me feel like, okay, that just felt like confirmation that what I was doing was definitely the right move for me. So yeah, I definitely understand that. And it's a little scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how you talk about, I mean, it sounds like the timing just really orchestrated itself in just an ideal way. And that's part of it too. A lot of times when we're feeling called to have a big change in our lives, a lot of it can be interesting how the more we get into that alignment with our higher self, with our soul, and we're really allowing everything to line up from that aligned space. A lot of the details can get worked out without us having to necessarily think our way through every single step, because it can feel so overwhelming.
Yes.
To be like, oh my gosh, how do I even navigate this? There are all these, moving parts to everything. So I don't know if you experience that. What I'm hearing is that there were elements of that where it was like things were just lining up, and like the way that you were saying that they were able to have this really deeply profound luncheon on such short notice, and you heard just what you needed to hear as you were leaving, and all of these things. And it's just really beautiful how things can come together in alignment.
Absolutely.
As
and
a
just when,
result of
when
that
you need
inner
it to.
alignment.
Absolutely. Kara, your book, Your Authentic Awakening, speaks beautifully about integrating spiritual practices into daily life. For those listening who are on their awakening journey but still feel stuck in the 3D, how can they begin to bring their spirituality into their everyday moments, work, relationships, parenting, even stress, stress?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the key. And that's walking the path, right? Because it can be easy to want to separate our lives into different segments. So I love how you were kind of like, there's the stress, there's the work, there's the parenting, there's the, all of these different aspects of our life. And we can add in spiritual practice to that. And I know that I have approached my life, and sometimes I still do, like kind of compartmentalize things, where it's like, okay, here's my meditation time, and this is where I'm going to really connect to my higher self. And then I move into family time and deal with that kind of thing. But I'm past the meditation time, and I'm past the spiritual like nourishment time.
Right.
And then maybe you go to work and you're in that mode. And as we keep moving through our spiritual journey, I think that things get more, everything informs everything else as we move through life. And so when I say that, it might feel complicated, and that it would take a lot to get from the beginning to something like that. But we don't have to have these major practices that are where we completely let go of our regular life in order to honor who we are spiritually. And I actually just this morning, as we're recording this, I did a live stream on something that I came across recently that is so simple, and I think can be really, really profound in our ability to create the life that we want. And I'm always looking for things like this, where it's just like, let's keep it simple, because
Yes.
it can get complicated, and it can feel complicated. But
And then you get turned
this
off
is just
by it if it feels complicated, if it feels hard, especially when you're just starting. Mm-hmm.
right. And so, one key word that we might hear frequently is manifestation.
Yes.
And that's kind of that can be the foundation of creating the life that we want, is manifesting it. But manifestation, it's the same as prayer. It's the same as, you can think of it even as a miracle. It's like we are actively working to bring in a change that we want to be the creators of our lives. And this, whatever it was that I came across, I can't remember the details now of who even was talking about it. I think it was somebody like Greg Braden or Bruce Lipton, something like that. But it was holding the intention of what it is that we want to manifest for like 17 seconds or something like that. And then they went into the quantum how it works in the quantum, like what makes that so powerful. And it's that when you have this intention, or you have this idea, or you have this visualization of what it is that you want to bring into your reality, and you give yourself the time to focus on it, then from the quantum perspective, all of these photons, like these tiny units of energy that are supportive of that intention, that match that intention. So any like quantum photon that's somewhere in the field, in the big, matrix that we're in, gets attracted to this intention. And according to whoever this was, there's something like 17 seconds. It might have been 18 seconds, but it was very a very small unit of time was enough to start to attract more photons, more units of energy that are supportive of that match it. So if you imagine like a tiny vibrating unit of energy that's vibrating a very specific rate, and there are other units of energy vibrating at that rate scattered around. And as you focus on that, your unit of energy, it starts to draw to it other like units of energy, and it builds. And so I've been utilizing this just as I like to take a walk most days. I'll walk my dog, and I usually listen to something on my, either like a podcast or an audiobook. And what I've been doing lately is, instead of doing that, I start my walk, like instead of putting something on right away, I start my walk with no music, and I'm just getting intentional. And I'm visualizing. And when I say visualize, I think we can also get caught up in words like visualization, because people can automatically be like, well, I can't visualize.
I'm one of those people.
Yeah. Because they think that they have to be able to see something really, really clearly.
Oh, you're breaking up suddenly, getting a little choppy.
Oh, am I? Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Oh, you're coming back in.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Is it good? Not choppy?
A little at the tail end, but you're definitely better than it was like a second ago.
Okay. Well, I'll keep going. Let me know if I'm fading.
You're good.
Am I back?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, when we feel like we are, have to visualize really clearly, meaning we have to see it really clearly, we have to be able to hold that visual. Some people have that specialty, that gift, where they're clairvoyant, and they, that's easier for them. But not everybody is built that way, but they still can, quote unquote, visualize. But for them, the visualization won't be associated with seeing a picture. But they can hold the intention, even if it's just repeating. The example I was using today was like, if you have an infection and you're wanting to be completely healed, then you might just repeat, if it's like a respiratory infection, my lungs are vibrant and healthy and completely healed. And it might just be for 17 seconds, or doubling that, or tripling that, like whatever you're able to hold, but holding that and repeating that more as an affirmation. Or it may be just feeling into, like, using our feeling sense to feel what it feels like for health and vitality and healing to completely immerse. What do your lungs feel like when they're completely saturated in healing divine light? So there are a lot of different correct ways to hold that intention.
Yes.
And the more that we can even get into the feeling sense, like, what does it feel like to be on the other side of that? What does it feel like to be awed by the miracle of how quickly it's happened, or to be so grateful for that, for feeling healthy again, for getting a good night's sleep because you're not waking up coughing, or whatever, or to go from being in a sense of lack and feeling that we don't have enough to feeling this of true abundance in our lives, or whatever it might be. But just going back to that 17 seconds, I feel that that is something that that's not a long time to stay focused on that one thing. And we can do that multiple times a day.
Yes.
And we don't have to even go into a meditation if that feels overwhelming. So that's where I like to have these kind of smaller wins that can really move the needle. And it's more a practice of just making small changes that can fit into our everyday, busy, modern lives. And so that's what when I wrote the book, that was the impetus to be like, we don't have to sever ourselves from the life that we've already created in order to step into the fullness of this new and bigger version of who we are. There have been plenty of people who have, dipped their toe into spiritual living or spiritual undertakings, and then they feel that in order to really explore it, they have to sever themselves from the old way and their old life. And I feel like there is that can be useful to go live in a monastery or something.
Not for everyone.
But exactly. It's not for everyone. And so we can really have a deep and profound, that's been my experience where I've had very deep and profound experiences while still engaging in modern life.
I love that. I'll share quickly. I love to share this little story of manifestation when I first started experimenting, and I was doing it without even noticing it. And I remember there was one day I was working busy all week, and it's come Saturday, and I had clients coming over at 11. And I'm thinking, I don't even have bottles of water in my house. So I know me, I run to the supermarket like really early, and I told myself, and I literally pointed at myself, and I was like, self, we are only getting the 11 things on our list. We are not going to be distracted by anything shiny today. And sure enough, as soon as I walk in, I see the most adorable little like candle holder to go outside in the balcony that went beautiful with my little Buddha. And it had the, what do you call that? Like the little stained glass on it. And I loved it. So I picked it up and I put it in my cart. And then I saw a little plant. I was like, oh, you look so cute. And I put it in my cart. And then I said, no, we said we're not going to do that. And I held it so close to my heart. And I said, oh my God, but you're going to be mine. You're going to be mine. And I'll be back for you and for your little friend too. And I put them back. I go home. Now, mind you, it's like 10 o'clock. I get back. They get there at 11. As they're leaving at like 12:15, they go, oh, by the way, we stopped and, you said you didn't want anything, like cash or anything. So we brought you a little gift. And what was it? It was that little candle holder and its little friend, the plant too.
Oh my gosh.
I said, if that was not the quickest and easiest.
Yeah.
But what it started to show me is that I've realized that people kind of manifest where they are. Where you are in your alignment is where you're going to manifest. And how quickly that's going to come is also depending on what you're trying to manifest.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a very quick one for me. And that really kind of boosted my interest in that more and more and more. But that was great.
Oh, I love that story. That's so powerful.
Well, you often talk about multidimensionality and quantum transformation concepts that can feel abstract to some. How do these higher dimensional experiences translate into real practical healing for people? And what does quantum living actually look like when it's embodied?
This is such an important point because first of all, there's a lot of jargon that people may come across on their journey, like multidimensionality, that we maybe it's like you say, it's more abstract and it's hard for us to understand how it applies to us. So there are a lot of different ways to think about multidimensionality. And the most direct way I think that applies to our conversation is that we are multidimensional beings, meaning we exist here in the third dimension, like on planet Earth, where we've got these physical bodies and we're engaging in a physical world. But we also, when we talk about that consciousness perspective we were talking about not very long ago, where we are conscious beings, and as conscious beings, we have lived other lives. We have lived potentially and probably on other planets, in other realms. Some of those realms may not have physicality, for example. One of the things that we might think about when we think of other life off planet, life beyond Earth. It's only been pretty recently that in the mainstream, this topic is becoming a more serious topic. For a long time, it was, people who talked about things like this were deemed crazy. And there was a concentrated effort to discredit them. Now we have in the US, there are disclosure congressional hearings where you've got whistleblowers and you've got people from the government who are saying as much as they can, but a lot of the information is classified, so there are a lot of questions that they can't answer. But this is becoming more and more a part of the zeitgeist in a really real way. And a lot of us have connections from a consciousness perspective where, yes, we have these physical earth lives and we have had experiences in other lives. And from the quantum perspective, everything is happening now. So we can think of them as past lives, like maybe we've had past lives on Earth and people might have even memories of that, or they've had readings where a psychic has explained to them that they have connections other places on this planet. And we might additionally have memories or things that we don't remember that's still veiled on other systems. And some of those systems might even have not much physicality to them. So again, if we think about like, oh, well, if there is life outside of this planet, then why aren't our telescopes seeing it? Why aren't, if we look at, Venus, for example, there doesn't seem to be any life there. And from what we can understand from the elements that make up the planet, it's too cold there to sustain life. And it's whatever the conditions are, it's got too much of this element that can't sustain life. But when we get those explanations, they're from a very human perspective,
Correct.
Assuming that life
looks like us,
is carbon-based,
Exactly.
And so there are a lot of indications that, first of all, life can exist, other types of life can exist in other types of elements than what we have here on our Earth. And that there are experiences where people are having lives, but they actually don't have physicality. They just have light. And so that's where we start to get into densities. You might hear about 5D or 6D. And beyond, it can go up. Some people say it goes up to 7D. Some people say it goes up to 12D. Some people go way beyond that. But these are all different they're based on spectrums of vibrational frequency. And people are connected to these, through other lives that they are living, have lived, will live. And we have access to that through our human technology. And when I say human technology, I mean our biological human body is a technology. And we can have experiences where we can connect to those aspects of us because those different aspects of us have different gifts that they have developed through their own experiences. And so I have a community, and we get together and meditate regularly online, and we work on our spiritual development and so forth. And just yesterday, we were doing a meditation that was in this theme, where it was allowing ourselves to relax and allowing this another aspect of ourselves, however we want to think about that, whether it is, another earth life or another, a hidden part of ourselves. But that part of ourselves may have gifts that it has developed, and it may have skills that it has developed. And so it's this opening ourselves up to invite in these other aspects of ourselves and integrating that into our lives. And these things can be very nebulous. So I'm sure there are people out there who are having like very palpable experiences with that, where it's like, whoa, I just saw this aspect of mine that was a priestess in ancient times, and she just like went into my heart, and now I can feel her and I can access her, and,
Oh, I
God
love
bless
that.
them
Right.
for having an experience like that. But for me, these things are a lot subtler, and there's a lot that happens in what I want to call the imaginal realm, which is slightly different from imagination. It is, our imagination comes from the imaginal realm as well, but the imaginal realm is this sort of like all possibilities realm that we can tap into, where we don't close ourselves off and say, well, it's black and white and it's got to be this, or it's this, or it's this much more open, free flow, where we can have some intentions, we can have some ideas, we can say like, okay, it is my intention to connect with this aspect of myself that is currently, has been asleep, but is ready to show itself and to become a more integrated part of myself. And we pay attention to what happens, to thoughts that come in, to words that we might suddenly think, or to, if we are visual, we might see a vision, or we might hear words. But again, it may be so subtle that it just feels like a thought that we thought. But where do our thoughts come from? We think we
Exactly.
create our thoughts, but we kind of like tune into our thoughts. And so that's one example of tuning in and utilizing in a practical way that multidimensional reality that we're in. And I say it's practical, but it's also, like I said, it's nebulous as well. It's not like these aren't hard and fast things, black and white, yes or no. It's much more malleable. We are much more in a creator mode of being able to be an active part of tapping into that, where it's not just like, okay, I'm going to just see what comes up. It's part of it is that like being intentional and reading the subtlety and allowing information in without immediately saying like, oh, that's just my imagination,
Right.
or whatever. So it's playful, and it's open, and it's in a state of acceptance. And a lot of times it continues to unfold over time as well.
I love that. That is so interesting. One of the things I've kind of played around with, I won't say played around with because I actually do this intentionally, and it always still kind of blows my mind when it happens, but I've learned to connect with my late husband on the other side. And when we were still in Florida, my last name being Rooks, chess pieces, after he passed, I would see them everywhere. And I was like, that's so weird that not used to seeing like chess boards or chess pieces everywhere. So I started to say, wait a minute, is he trying to communicate with me? So I started to kind of test it, and I would ask for like a specific chess piece. And I was like, okay, this is going to be our connection. If this is how you're going to communicate, when I ask for a sign, you're going to show me a chess piece, and it'll be the one that I ask for. And it would always come through. And I mean,
Oh
I
my
remember one
gosh.
day actually walking with my boyfriend, and a car came out of nowhere, and it looked like it got stopped on its own. Like it literally looked like it hit a brick wall in the middle of nowhere. And I just had this intense feeling afterwards, like he was right there. And I said to him, I go, okay, I'm walking into this store where I know there has nothing to do with, I was getting my sage and my Palo Santo and my incense, and I'm like, I know this has nothing to do. I said, but if that was you, you need to show me a sign. You need to show me a sign when I get in this. Do you know we walked in this store, and on the bottom shelf of a store I'd been in how many times before was a brand new book on how to play chess.
Oh my
I
gosh.
called my boyfriend over and I go, do you see this? And he goes, he did stop the car. And I said, I think he did.
Oh, gives me so many chills.
And it's just been amazing. And it's pretty funny because since moving to Spain, it's like 3 weeks went by and I'm like, I haven't seen anything. So like you mentioned on your walks, my walks are very intentional. My walks are very just clear-minded and just, I don't listen to anything anymore. I just kind of stay present and let whatever's going to come to me, come to me. And I had a whole conversation with him the other day. I said, how come since I've been here, I haven't seen any signs of you? I said, well, you USA bound? Like, what's going on with that? I thought you could go anywhere. And I saw a chessboard on TV. The next day, he and I went out to dinner over here. And in the middle of a restaurant where it seemed like you would not see it was a whole chessboard. I said, okay, now
Wow.
you're showing off. But it's I love that whole thought process of just being aware and knowing that we have connections to other beings and other dimensions if we just tune in.
Yes, what a beautiful story. I love that.
Thank you. I love it. It makes me happy.
Yeah.
Now, the word authenticity. It carries so much frequency, Kara, in both your work and mine. From your perspective, what does it really mean to live an authentically awakened life? And how
Oh,
does that authenticity become the bridge between the human and the divine?
what a great question. And I would love to hear from you as well, since authenticity is a big part of your work too. You know, for me, it's sort of the warts and all, right? Because I know that part of my spiritual journey has been the focus on love and light. I was there for a long time where it was, I'd heard about shadow work, I'd heard about, all of this sort of, you know, the robustness of the fullness of who we are. But I was very drawn to the love and light side. It was like, no, I'm not really interested in exploring my own shadows or bigger shadows in terms of like our collective and and there was logic behind that. For one thing, that was the guidance that I was receiving for a period of time where it was, that was just that lineage that I was in, or that teacher or whatever, where it was like, yeah, it's true. Like we all have stuff in our past, but let's not dwell on it. Let's just keep moving forward. And what going back to that manifestation and like attracting like, and it's like, well, do you want to be kind of focused on the traumas and the parts of yourself you don't like so much and attract more to that, or do you want to be focused on the love and the light? And so it's not that that's wrong, but it's just not complete.
Mm-hmm.
Is has been what I have found, is that we are these complete beings, and part of the opportunity that we have from a spiritual perspective is to come into acceptance and integration for the fullness of who we are. And that means that there are shadow aspects. And when we think about shadow aspects, that can be repressed memories. I've had that experience
Mm-hmm.
where, things come that I've buried and then they come up and I'm like, well, what is this? And why did I forget it? And I should probably forget it again because I obviously didn't want to think about that. And
Wow, I had that same
then
experience yesterday.
really,
Wow, go ahead, please. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you just really wowed me with that.
yeah, yeah. And, I've had this experience too coming up a lot this year in particular, and it's come up recently for me again with a different thing, but the same theme. And so it can be that the kind of repressed, suppressed memories. It can be also like parts of ourselves that we don't like, that we project onto other people. So there can be things with our own behavior and our own, the thoughts that we have that we don't even want to acknowledge that we have, but we get really triggered when somebody else acts them out. That's our subconscious that
Projection.
we yes, and we won't accept it within ourselves. So it's still, and the fact that it triggers us shows that it's still working behind the scenes. It's still, dictating our behavior to a certain extent, but we won't acknowledge it, so we're not healing it, so it continues to trigger us. So that's another way that the shadow works. And it can be things within the collective that are happening, like bigger things outside of our sphere of control that are happening that are, illusions that are created to give certain people more power. And there's a lot of evidence that's coming more and more to light that's available for us that we can look into and accept and start to be able to process and start to be able to understand like what's motivating the behavior of the masses. Or we can decide that that's too much for our psyche. And like I said, I've been there. It was too much. I couldn't accept it. I didn't want to go into it. It was scary. And I couldn't possibly believe that people would manipulate the masses in the way that, the evidence is there if we're willing and ready to look at it. So there are all these ways that this works with the shadow. And so for me, it is being willing. It's not all about the shadow, but it really is about walking forward into the highest version of myself and understanding that that's not always a pretty process. It's not always, butterflies and kittens and unicorns. It can be hard when we're doing it and we come up against things that are difficult, that are, that are dark. That's part of the process. And then the challenges of that come from that, and then there are other practical ways that this comes up. A very, very practical way for me that this is showing itself right now is that I'm letting my gray hair grow out.
Okay.
And so it's not to say that anybody who is coloring their hair is doing anything wrong. I colored my hair for, many, many years, I think probably about 17 years or so. And I'm going through this process now of letting my gray hair grow. And this is, for me, it's another step into the authenticity of who I really am. This is, and all of the aspects of that. So not only embracing that I'm getting older and the gifts that come with getting older, but, especially in a society that prizes youth and the illusion of youth. But it's also this confronting, like, what do I feel as I start to see in the mirror this change within me? And then the gifts that come through it as well, where I'm like, I'm also trusting the process that whatever is kind of hidden beneath the dye is like creates a, I don't know how to say this properly, but it's like the whole, the tone of my skin and the even like from an aura perspective, the energy that's not so perceptible with our physical eyes, but I feel like by leaning into my natural color, that that there is a coherence and like a fluidity and a complementary color that will come through from that, versus me saying like, well, I want my hair to be a little bit darker brown now, or a little bit lighter brown now, or make it a little warmer or a little cooler or whatever. I'm really curious to see how it flows with my own skin tone and my aura and all of those kind of intangible things. That again is a lot more nebulous than practical, but it's a practical thing that I'm going through. I feel like I'm going through this very like long portal of, of another layer of authenticity.
I love it.
In my journey.
I love, before I left, I went to see my girl about my grays. And I'd even said to her, I said, I think I'm ready to just like let it come out. And she goes, that's really nice, but your hair is not there yet. I said, what do you mean? She says, you don't have enough of them. She goes, you got a few in your crown. She says, but they're like nowhere else. And I've always had, as my mom called me, this rainbow bright hair thing going on, because my hair naturally has 3 colors. It's got brown, red, and blonde.
Oh.
So I've always, tried to do something to make it one color. So I said, well, if it's not going to go natural yet, then I'm going to go with the other authentic side of myself. I love the color purple. And I could not do that in my corporate existence.
Yeah.
I'm going to go purple. Maybe
I love it.
A little lavender, maybe a little, put something in there. And I feel like that is, and the funny thing is, I was talking about it the last couple of days. Everywhere I look, somebody's either got something purple, or their hair is purple, or they're wearing purple. I'm like, why am I seeing so much purple? And he goes, because it's time.
Yes, I have found exactly the same. When I made the choice to let my gray grow, everywhere I look, people are growing out their gray, like strangers.
Yes.
And I don't think I even know anybody in my personal, maybe one person who has been going through this, like that I know personally, but I see it all the time. And my husband and I went on a trip to Santa Fe like last month, and I noticed it everywhere. And Santa Fe is really an artsy town. And so I made a comment like toward the end of our trip, I'm like, well, I fit right in here because there are so many women with gray hair. And he's like, really?
He didn't even
And I
notice.
said, yes, everybody has gray hair. He's like, oh, I didn't even notice. So and we were together the whole time. So I thought that was really funny that like in my world, it seems so obvious. But what I also loved about that is that Santa Fe attracts artists.
Yes.
And I have such a high respect for artists because I do feel like they're kind of ahead of the game in terms of like really their creativity and leaning into who they really are. And I know that's a very broad sweeping thing, but when you see artists, like they tend to be very individualistic and expressive and really own who they are. And so to be in a place that attracts that type of mentality, which I appreciate so much, and then see that with it and kind of have that, to link those two things, to be like, oh, this is kind of an artsy expression. And I love to see that because I don't feel like really an artsy person. So to see that kind of expression as an expression of myself in a way, I was like, ooh, I've got this sort of like, there's an artsy sort of side to me. I love that.
Oh, that's the one thing I miss is I've been a painter for years, and I miss my paintings. They're all now in storage in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
In my future brother-in-law's house. So it's kind of weird to look around and not see like my paintings on the wall. But the funny thing that they've noticed is how my style has changed. I literally, when I got out of corporate detox, everything got donated. And I went shopping, and he's like, you're like this whole boho person now. I said, I feel so true to my spirit.
Yeah.
But it's true. I feel like I'm fine. Like, to answer your question, and I will give you the easy answer, to me, just living your authentic self is exactly that. We all have a truth in our spirit, and it's got to be okay to let that shine. We're so afraid of doing that. We're so, like you said, we live by the rules our parents set for us when their expectations of who we were supposed to be and what we were supposed to do. And then you get into a corporate world and they dictate what that looks like and what that's how you're supposed to act. And God forbid you have tattoos and piercings like I do. I was like, I don't understand how that makes me not do my job properly.
Right.
But it's just being able to live yourself, your truth, be who it is on a soul level, and be okay with expressing that to the world and knowing that you're not going to be judged and you're going to be accepted. And whether, even if everybody doesn't accept you, then it's not meant for them.
Right.
So that's my quick version to that. But I have one more question because I see that we're like nearing our time here. But if you could leave, Kara, our listeners with one energetic transmission or message from your heart, something the collective most needs to hear right now, what would that be?
I think that is answered by really what you just stated in terms of the authenticity and really leaning into who it is that you are as a person. And just like you were saying, we move through this life and we get conditioned. We have the expectations of others that plays into our behavior. And the more that we can become aware of what is important to us, what we truly value, and we can separate that from what other people's values are or what they want for us or what is the right path for them. That is when we become aligned with our souls, and that is when we can live in more fulfillment and more purpose. And going back to the topic even of just the gray hair, which is, it's hair at the end of the day. There are much more critical things than hair. But this is also an experience that I'm going through, and I'm learning so much through it. And one of the things that I'm noticing about myself is that I really love my gray hair as it's starting to grow when I look at it with my eyes. Mm-hmm. But there are times when I catch myself looking at it through the eyes of somebody who won't get it, mm-hmm. Someone who would never stop coloring their hair mm-hmm. because they couldn't imagine why on earth you'd want to do that. And and we do this so easily where we start to see what we're doing or the choices that we're making or our lives or whatever, and we see it through another person's eyes. So that could be our parents, or it could be our best friend, or it could be our spouse, or it could be any number of people who have influence over us. So we want to be aware of, are we looking through our eyes? Are we making our decisions from our own perspective and what really matters to us? Or are we trying to live and make choices based on what other people value and what they think is important? And we can be doing that. We can be doing the latter without realizing that we're doing it.
Absolutely.
So it's really coming into the full knowing of our motivations and and that comes down to really knowing who we are. And that's a process, but it's available for everybody. And that is my hope and my blessing for all listeners.
Thank you, Kara. Oh, Kara, this has been such a sacred and illuminating conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your journey, and your light with all of us today. You've brought such clarity and grace to what it means to live authentically awake, not as a concept, but as a lived reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for inviting me on and for hosting this amazing podcast and conversation. Thank you. I'm really honored to join you.
Thank you. For everyone listening, I highly recommend that you explore Kara's book, Your Authentic Awakening, A Guide to Everyday Spiritual Living, and tune into her incredible podcast, Soul Elevation, where she continues to inspire and raise consciousness one conversation at a time. You will find all of her links in today's show notes. And loves, before we close, I want to invite you into the High Priestess Energy Portal for the week of November 23rd. This portal will open under deeply introspective energies, guiding us into a phase of inner sovereignty and intuitive mastery. This is where we stop searching for truth outside of ourselves and begin remembering the wisdom that's always been within. If today's conversation stirred something with you, that quiet knowing that your soul is ready to rise, the portal is your invitation, and you will find all the details in the show notes. Until next time, loves, stay grounded, stay open, and remember, your authenticity is the highest frequency you can embody. When you live from that space, everything you seek naturally aligns. I'll see you inside the portal and here next week on Awaken Your Authentic Self.